Hey everybody, welcome to video 17. Today we get a short introduction to the classification of joints. If you made it this far through the video lectures, good job, keep going. I can promise that we got, two more after this. The end of these skeletal system videos is near. So looking at the classification of joints, a joint can also be called an articulation. An articulation is just basically where two things are meeting, two things are joining, and usually they're going to be interacting or moving in some way. The classification of joints, the three main categories, are based on how much movement are allowed at that joint. Do they allow no movement, a little movement, or a lot of movement? So we'll take a look at each of these individually. The first one is Synarthrosis Joints or Synarthrotic Joints, Amphiarthrosis or Amphiarthrotic Joints, and then we'll take a look at Diarthrotic or Diarthrosis Joints. So your Synarthrotic joints, these are going to be joints that allow for no movement. If you want to pause the video and think about them, you can. We're going to go ahead and keep rolling. So some joints that allow for no movement are going to be those, for example, in your skull, and those are going to be called sutures. So before we get to this picture here, I'll show you. We have Bartholomew's head here. So you can see these sutures that run along. Here's his face to give you an idea of where we're at here. But you have these sutures, and they run along the side here. Kind of tough to see these, but then you do have these that form this V here, and then they end up splitting the head in half, running all the way back to that occipital bone that sits back here. But each of these joints, the older you get, they become more and more grown together and more bony to the point where they allow no movement, and they are synarthrotic joints. Now, before when you're born, those sutures have not come together yet, and that's why you have the picture here, is that you actually have what's called fontanelles. They are the soft spots in your head. So if you've ever heard soft spots in a baby's head, they are the fontanelles. And they're going to be the areas where those sutures have not formed yet because those bones have not come together. Now, the reason you have these fontanelles is because a baby's head is very large in comparison to the rest of its body. Your head grows very slowly after you're born because, for the most part, your brain is filling up that space that's already fairly large. And so you don't have a whole lot of growth needed in your head. You'll have some development and things, but growth itself won't really be taking place. But these fontanelles allow literally for a baby's head to fold and bend while they're being born. So this is going to make it easier on the mother. It's an evolutionary adaptation. Babies that were born with fontanelles had higher success at being born, and their mothers ended up surviving more. And so we see now today, most people have, or I should say all people have fontanelles, but now there's really less of a selective pressure against it with modern medicine and being able to do cesarean sections and things like that. But this is also why you need to be very careful with newborn babies. Those soft spots in their head, you can basically touch their brain if you touch one of them in a fontanelle. So you want to be very careful that no damage comes to them via those fontanelles. The next joint type, amphiarthrotic joints, these are going to allow for very little movement, but there will be some movement. Again, you can pause the video to think of examples if you'd like. But one example is the pubic synthesis. You'll remember that cartilaginous joint. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on Bartholomew here. But the pubic synthesis right here, this cartilage, does allow for very slight movement, especially in females. It is important during childbirth, again, to allow for those hips to have a little bit of movement at that pubic synthesis. Then each of your vertebral joints is going to be an amphiarthrotic joint. So you might be confused and think, well, you can bend down and touch your toes, you can twist and do all sorts of things. That seems like a lot of movement for your vertebral joints. And while in total it is, the truth is each individual vertebral joint, where you have these intervertebral discs here, allow for very, very little movement. And the reason you're able to bend down and touch your toes is because you have 24 vertebrae that are each allowing for a little bit of movement. And so a little bit of movement over 24 joints ends up adding up to the point where you're able to touch your toes and you're able to move all sorts of things with your back. So it may not seem like it, but your vertebral joints are amphiarthrotic joints. The last one is your diarthrotic joints. These are ones that allow free movement. Usually when you think of a joint, you're probably thinking of a diarthrotic joint. All of these joints are going to have synovial fluid. They're going to have a capsule and everything. They're going to have cartilage to reduce friction in those joints. Remember the articular cartilage from your anatomy of a long bone. And there are 6 types of diarthrotic joints, and we'll cover these in the next lecture. You have your ball and socket, your hinge, pivot, saddle, gliding, and then condyloid joints. And so these are pictures here. Again, we're going over diarthrotic joints in the next video. But remember, these are the ones that allow for free movement. If you're somebody that's going into any sort of orthopedics, you're interested in surgery of joints and different things like that, you'll spend a lot of time learning about the anatomy of diarthrotic joints, the bursa sacs, and various things that are located here. But we won't really get into those in this class. So that is a brief overview of the types of joints you have in your body. Remember, your synarthrotic, no movement. Your amphiarthrotic is very little movement. And then your diarthrotic are the free movement joints. So that is all. Make sure that you're taking your video quizzes, staying up to date on those. And I hope you have a good day.